Thank you all for joining us. We're from Orchis.io. Orchis is about orchestrated identity microservices. It's a whole different way of looking at identity that really strives to enable cloud deployments across multiple private clouds, multiple public clouds, as well as drive the user experience across this. When you start thinking about user experience, it's really about how close can we get to the customer as possible, how quickly can we process the transaction, and how agile can we make the digital business or the line of business. So you'll hear those repeated themes throughout the course of this presentation. I'm going to take about 5 minutes of your time with a quick overview and then hand it off to Lucas, who's going to drive the meat of the matter with a live demo showing session and transaction mobility, as well as what we call our adaptive, our continuous adaptive risk-based authorization, which is inculcating data security feeds from, in this case, it's an Imperva WAF, to make real-time authorization decisions as well as remediate threats. That being said, IAM's been around a really long time. Late 90s, it really got started. It hasn't progressed a lot since then. It's really been workforce related, focused on GRC, which is, of course, very important. But as you start moving into cloud-based environments, your whole mindset around four walls perimeter has to change. In this case, we're seeing it rapidly develop well beyond what's being labeled today as consumer identity access management into consumers, employees, devices, things, APIs, locations, and applications. Each of those have their own identity that needs to be managed from an authentication authorization perspective, as well as the relationships between those different entities has to be managed from an authentication authorization perspective, giving digital business the ability to rapidly flip switches, meaning let's move from cloud provider to cloud provider, or let's even deploy our applications across multiple cloud services. From our perspective, what we see our customers using the Orchis IAM stack for is cloud enablement. That's almost the number one. Hey, we're going under a DevOps revolution that we've heard some of our the other presenters talk about, and we're trying to use some of the legacy IAM products out there. It's not working. How can you help facilitate, our CI/CD pipeline? How can you help us move faster? Our different lines of business want to move faster. They want to consume, roll out new features to our customers, and they want to do it in a much more secure manner. How can we take that to the next step? Consumer IAM, massive scale. When I say massive scale, I mean billions of users and billions of connected devices, as well as the interrelationships between those. Our largest customer is a very large telco in India, and they're doing 1 billion users, 3 billion connected devices, 500,000 transactions per second. So we're talking about real numbers that require that microservices architecture, as well as a very linear horizontal scalability capacity. Anything in financial services, if we start thinking about security, it's been distracted for 15 years. I think that's a fair way to say it. And what I mean by distracted is it's not talking to each other. We're segmented on the network security, data security, audit, and then application security, and even identity security are sitting well outside of that. IoT, as you start even building these relations between users, entities, applications, now you have to start thinking about both devices, meaning consumption devices, connectivity devices, and things, and building relationships between all of those as well. So you're seeing your order of your scale of complexity go up by orders of magnitude each time we add one of these. And then finally, distributed applications. When you are going through your cloud enablement and you're starting to move into your later phases of cloud and say, hey, you know what? We're going to pull APIs out of our monolithic applications. We're going to pull microservices even out of our APIs. And we want to distribute those as widely as possible, meaning multiple cloud service providers, multiple VPCs, and even some things on-prem. How do we support that? And then finally, and this is what we're going to spend most of the time talking about today, is adaptive transactional authorization. What can we learn about the user through a machine learning, and also what can we use coming from our data security and our amalgamated data security appliances, feeds, to actually make more intelligent business decisions as well as more intelligent authorizations. I threw this cloud in here because I know it's a key focus for everybody, meaning this is on the tips of everyone's tongue, particularly in the financial services sector. From a cloud enablement perspective, we're seeing 3 major steps, right? Your existing platforms, which are often burning platforms, legacy, following the waterfall approaches. You have the monolithic giant code bases for application architecture. oftentimes hosted on a mainframe or dedicated server hardware, things of that nature. Now, most people are in the process of migrating to what we call the current, right? We're going from a waterfall to an agile approach. Our business owners are yelling at us saying, hey, you know what? We need to roll out new features faster. You're moving into or have some N-tier apps, meaning web app server, data store, and then you're also rolling out a VPC. That VPC might be on AWS, it might be in Azure. But we're also seeing at the same time the planning that's moving forward, and that's going from Agile to a full DevOps CI/CD pipeline, meaning how can I push out builds every night, every week? How can I get new features? How can I get patching done very, very quickly? How can I, again, extract those APIs and microservices from my existing applications? How can I move to a containerized world so I can spin up, spin down very, very quickly to give a full elastic functionality? And then how can I span both public and private clouds? And when I do span those public and private clouds, how can I move my security with me? So this is the historical security approach, right? Where there's been it's been a log jam almost. We've got data security on the right. We've got Gandalf sitting in the middle, making sure that nobody comes over the bridge, because we wouldn't want to take that data security information and merge that with our typical authorization information. This is how we are moving. So bring IAM, data security, and the business together. That is a key fundamental point. Security has to be an enabler to make us successful. I'm sorry, I gotta speed up a little bit. As part of that, we've got convenience. So bringing social login, adaptive access control, time-based OTPs, FIDO UAF that are easy and frictionless ways for the customer to get engaged, as well as security, making sure obviously we're meeting both our GRC requirements and protecting million, billion-dollar transactions. And then most importantly, on the business side, is bringing a frictionless user experience. I don't want to impact the user experience unless I absolutely have to, and I want to do that in a very adaptive way. Let's focus on mobile and things as a hub, meaning we're going to, like I said, we're going to see a session mobility demo very shortly. Bring seamless integration, make sure we use the Open API framework to make sure we can integrate as quickly as possible into your applications. It can be delivered either as a SaaS service or on-prem. Make authorization much simpler. Let's remove the very coarse-grained policies and go to a fully risk-based authorization engine, and then make it extensible. What that means, in terms of real-world scenarios is we're taking behavioral anomalies, we're taking data security feeds, we're taking threat intelligence, we're feeding all those into what we call our meta session store, which is doing that relationship model building between who you are, what you have, where you are, what you're doing, how you're doing it, what you're doing it with, and sometimes even how. Then when we see an anomaly, as we see coming down now and through the data security, you know what? The risk factor goes off the scale. So let's do an orchestrated risk remediation. What that means is in the middle of your transaction, we're going to pause and say, uh-oh, things look fishy. What can I do to either increase the trust or reduce the risk of those transactions? It might be, let's pop up a multi-factor authentication. Let's turn up auditing and send it over to the SOC. Let's do endpoint patching of some sort. Or any other discrete business process that makes sense for your line of business. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lucas so he can show you how some of this stuff works in real time.
Could we switch laptops, please? Video. Oh, yeah, so let me show you how it works. We have imagine that we have a application on a mobile device, and this application is protected by OrchIS and the OrchIS gateway. There is a web application firewall as well installed in the front, and we are all these three components are talking to each other: OrchIS, gateway, and the WAF. You can see the OrchIS login screen. Let me authenticate to this app. This login screen, we're just authenticating with username and password. But over there, behind the scenes, we are gathering information about the device, about the device, your location, and as well, we can do it also frictionless without passwords, of course. This is a sample app. Imagine that you have it on your mobile device. You can just over here in this app, you can just select nearby ATMs. As you can see, two are active, located in New York. The other ones are grayed out. And since this is kind of soft enforcement that is happening on a device, so user is not going to be able to select that. Let me just withdraw some cash in one of these ATMs. I will just click withdraw. you will see how now you will see how the relationship microservice as well as the authorization microservice work together along with the session service. This is what we're going to see here is the session mobility. I've started the transaction on one device, and now I will go to the other device. Let's see, this is the, I'm coming to the ATM. ATM is in nearby. I've just initiated the transaction on one device that is trusted device and in the location where I've already done that before. So I will just put the card into the ATM, and I'm able to just, the $100 is waiting for me. So I can withdraw that completely frictionless. Of course, there are many options to, of configuration of that thing. So if somebody would like to withdraw a bigger amount, then there could be some additional steps. So let's get back to the real quickly to this side with to our application. So 4 of these ATMs are grayed out, but of course this is done on the device, so somebody can also can call the API. Can call this API. Oh, sorry, I'm just logged out by mistake. Oops. Yeah, so let me get back to this app again. Take me back. So I will just try to withdraw some cash from the other ATM, but you can see that I'm not allowed to because this is already something that our Authy engine prevents. Let me log in as the administrators to show you the policy that we have defined over here. Sorry. Let me just log in as an admin. So let's switch to the access policies, location policy. We just created some sample policy in here using this configurator, where you can see that in perimeter of the city, this is just user authenticated with identifier and password can request withdrawal of the cash. So relationships and authorization engine, they can work together. And additionally to this, our authorization engine can also take into account the behavior of the user and additional contextual information. Not only this what you have seen. So let's take a look at the simple risk-based policy, the other policy that is created over there. And this is associated with the risk and the user risk profile. Let's say that the user starts with a risk profile 0, and when something suspicious is happening over there, user risk level is increasing by 25 points. So if a user has a 25, the risk level 25 or less, only authentication with username and password is required to perform the transaction. But if the risk increases, the risk profile of a user, the MFA and with TOTP is required. And when user is gonna get 75, then he's not gonna be able to perform the transaction. So let me log in with me. Let me authenticate with the user for which I have to the banking. Let me log out first. I will log out, and I will just let me log into with the user for which I have the second factor configured. So this is because I have a TOTP on my mobile. So this is again our dashboard of OrchIS, but let's get back to our app. And now this is my user, and let's do something suspicious. So WAF has detected that, and we detected that I just got warning about that something is happening, but I'm still able to use the app. I have 25. My risk level is 25. Now it has increased to 50. So now I need to provide my one-time password. And I'm providing one-time password. So I can get back to the app. If I do it one more time, if I'm going to do it one more time, I'm not going to be able to access anything. I've just got cut off. So we are not cutting off user at the very beginning. We are trying to give him option to recover. There is another option where, there is another thing that I wanted to show, but let's save time, and I will switch back to Nathaniel. Basically, user sessions can be killed if user is doing some malicious attack, in this case.
So yeah, sorry
could we switch back to the other laptop?
Please. So what's happening, and we've got about a minute to wrap up, is we're taking all of our meta session information, which is the connection of the relationships and what's going on between the user, the devices, the locations, et cetera. We're building on top of those authorization validators. So that can be an attribute-based validator, and a location-based validator, a risk-based validator, or even custom validators that go out to independent fraud engines. We bring that data back, and then in the valuation of that transaction, we process. And if you fall within that range of 0 through 50, everything's okay. Let's go ahead and continue to move forward in the transaction. 50 through 75, it's mitigatable, right? Let's do something to actually mitigate that threat, and that could be a mitigatable MFA type, it could be a mitigatable endpoint type, it could be a mitigatable audit. And then at 75, we get back to our binary authorization protocol where, let's block everything and wrap it up. I think that's pretty much it. Let me jump to the question slide. I'm Nathaniel. This is Lucas. We've got 3 or 4 questions to address. So the first one, what is our false positive rate? So we're really dependent upon other vendors, meaning your existing data security infrastructure you've already invested in, as well as our behavioral anomalies to generate the overall risk on that transaction. And so what that means is our transaction rate is dependent upon our false positive rate is really dependent upon what we're receiving in, right? Because we can't be everything to everybody from a security perspective, but we can consume what you've already invested in and try to unify that in an authorization perspective. What that means is when you are processing those false positives, that there is more friction on a couple of those transactions, but there's not more frictions on many of the transactions. So you can still process it without saying no. How do you do geolocation resolution? So it's available in the SDK or via HTTP headers or IPs. So there's user entitlements are also managed. Our customer entitlements are also managed within the OrchIS product. So you can make the determination for things like GDPR of what they can share, what they can't share. Do we find that companies have a strong preference for how their users are authenticated? Absolutely, and I think it's getting more and more complicated, to be honest with you. We're seeing more and more requests for authentication chains with risk-based factors in the middle of those. So not just your traditional adaptive authentication, but also, how have they been authenticated? How many times? When was the last time they authenticated? How can we re-authenticate them at a higher level for a more important transaction? How to integrate with external user directories or user databases. So we support out of the box LDAP, SQL, NoSQL, SCIM, and REST to talk to any existing LDAP or SQL, NoSQL type databases. How much did I pay that guy? Oh. I think that's it. Thank you.